and nothing but the truth so help you God?
I do.
May be seated.
Mr. Rogers, go ahead and grab a seat there and get right close to that mic, okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Would you please state and spell your name for the court reporter?
James Rogers, Jamesrogers,
And Mr. Rogers, where do you live?
6200 Yarborough Road, Mebane.
And are you familiar with the case involving the deaths of Lyric Woods and Devin Clark?
Yes, ma'am.
And are you familiar with the area their bodies were located?
Yes, ma'am.
And where is that in relation to where you live?
It's about 150 yards from my house to the location where the bodies were found.
I want to draw your attention to that weekend of September 16th, 17th, and 18th. What were you doing that weekend?
I was going down to Ocean Drive for a beach festival at North Myrtle Beach, and was leaving Saturday morning around 6 o'clock. And
So what did you do Friday night?
I didn't go anywhere Friday night. I got everything ready, packed to go Saturday morning.
And at some point in the overnight hours, did you wake up in the middle of the night?
Yes, ma'am.
And can you tell the jury a little bit about what happened?
Well, I went to bed at 12 o'clock, and I set my alarm clock to get up at 6 o'clock. And all of a sudden, I heard a commotion like fireworks or something was going off, and it woke me up. And I was thinking, well, I don't know who in the world was shooting off fireworks or if somebody was deer hunting it early in the morning. So I just laid there for a few minutes and decided to go on back to sleep. And then I heard 4 gunshots. And the first time that woke me up, I looked at my clock, it was 5 minutes to 2. So I laid there, like I said. And then when I heard the 4 shots, it woke me up. And I looked at the clock, it was 5 minutes after 2. At that time, I got up and looked out my bedroom window toward Buckhorn Road, see if I could see headlights or whatever I could see going down the road. Didn't see anything, so I went to my living room, and I looked out my picture window down Yarborough Road, and I didn't see anything going on there, so I stayed in the living room for about 10 minutes or so. Went back to my bedroom, went to the bathroom, came back, laid down, went to sleep. Alarm went off at 6 o'clock. I got up, took a shower, and at 7:30, that's when I got on the road to go to North Myrtle Beach.
Okay. You identified the sound that you heard as gunshots. Can you describe your familiarity with what gunshots sound like?
Yes, I've hunted most of my life, and there's a gun club behind my house, maybe a quarter mile if you go through the woods, and they're shooting there Fridays and all weekends and stuff like that.
Was there anything distinctive about the shots that you heard, or how would you describe them?
It was a loud 4 shots. I mean, everything was completely quiet. There wasn't any cars going up and down the road or anything. And it was just pow, 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 pow. And that's what got me up.
I don't have any other questions for this witness, Your Honor. Thank you.
Mr. Trout?
Yes, Your Honor, briefly. Good morning, Mr. Rogers.
Good morning.
So you mentioned that you live on Yarborough Road, not Buckhorn Road.
That's right.
So does your house face Buckhorn Road? Is your mailbox face Yarborough? What is the orientation of your house to Buckhorn?
My house faces Yarborough Road. And then there's a tree line and a field, and then there's Buckhorn Road.
Okay. And so there's a little bit of a barrier between your house and Buckhorn Road.
That's right.
And so if you were to look out your window toward Buckhorn Road, there would be trees and some things obstructing your view.
Yes, sir.
And I guess maybe on good days, maybe the trees and those barriers might even keep some of the sound from Buckhorn because that's a little bit busier of a road.
Well, at that time of the year, the leaves had done started falling. And it was pretty much a clear view.
Okay.
Most of the limbs on the trees in that wood area are up high.
Now, I guess if you were leaving your house, are there any houses between your house and Buckhorn Road?
No.
Okay. And there's like a fence line with maybe some animals?
There's a fence line, and at that time, there were, the lady had 4 horses out there.
Okay.
But the horses are not in the field during the night. They put them up in barns.
Okay. Okay. And you mentioned that you went to bed around midnight,
Yes, sir.
and that you heard a sound that kind of startled you, and when you turned around and looked, it was a little bit before 2 a.m.
It was 5 minutes to 2.
All right, so whatever startled you happened somewhere around 1:55, 1:54 a.m.
Right.
And then after you heard that, you said you got out of the bed and kind of looked out the window?
No, the first time I just thought to myself, I wonder what was going on. 'Cause, behind me, there's a pond at the end of the field. There's a trailer there, and the people that used to live there have had some parties and stuff, and they would set off fireworks.
Okay.
But at this time, there was nobody there.
Okay.
So it was sort of odd that I heard it, and then that's when I didn't pay much attention to it. And then after a few minutes, that's when I heard 4 shots, and that's when I looked at the clock and got up out of bed.
Okay. And so there were a couple minutes, several minutes between the first shots or the first sound that you heard, and then what you heard when you were kind of awake and conscious and aware, the 4 shots, that was 5 minutes after 2.
Yes, sir.
And so you aren't certain that the sound that you heard before were shot. Maybe they were fireworks. Maybe it was something that woke
Right.
you up. But when you heard that sound, the first inclination was to look by that pond because people go hang out by that pond.
Right.
You said you looked out the window, I guess in different directions at the pond and maybe towards Buckhorn, but you didn't see any movement.
No, sir, from the stop sign where I could see, coming down Buckhorn Road to where the pond and that trailer is, I didn't see any commotion or no vehicles, no lights or anything.
And you mentioned your house is about 150 yards from Buckhorn. Is it typical or common for you to hear talking conversations towards Buckhorn or in any other direction?
No, sir.
Okay, it's not close enough for that?
No, sir.
Okay. And you didn't notice any headlights, and I think you said you stayed up for at least 10 more minutes and didn't see any cars drive by or anything like that?
No, sir.
And then after you didn't see or perceive anything else, you didn't hear any more sounds, you went to bed and continued on with your trip to the beach that following morning.
Right.
You were contacted by law enforcement, is that right?
Well, to start with, I was contacted by my son. When I went down to the beach, they have a thing called Fun Sunday, Fun Monday. So after we did Fun Sunday and came back to the gentleman's house I was staying at, my son called me and told me they had found a couple of bodies right off of Buckhorn Road. And I said, well, how do you know? He said, well, they had the road completely blocked both ways with highway patrol, sheriff's department cars. So he had to go around. And then he walked down to the scene, and I believe it was Detective Barry said something, they found it. And my son told him that I had mentioned that I had heard some shots earlier that morning. So he said, well, Detective Barry would like for me to come in and make a deposition or something. So I told him, I said, well, tell him I'll be in Tuesday. And my son said, well, he would like to have a deposition before Tuesday. So I cut my trip short, and I came in that Monday morning.
Oh, so at what point did you tell your son that you heard these shots?
Saturday afternoon, that I told him that I had made it down there, because if I go on a trip, I always call them, tell them that I'm there, made it safely. And then he said, well, fine. He didn't know anything at that time that I know of. And then Sunday afternoon around 5 or 5:30 is when he called me back.
And your son, does he live close by, same street, same?
Well, he lives behind me.
Okay. And,
You go down a little bit farther, another drive, and go down behind me.
and when you strike that. And you said those 4 shots you heard after 2 were loud, and you said you heard 4.
4. Yes, sir.
Nothing further, Judge.
All right. Any redirect?
Just briefly, Your Honor.
Yes, ma'am.
In those 10 minutes that you stayed up after hearing the 4 shots, did you hear anything else?
No, ma'am.
That's all I have, Your Honor.
Anything else?
Nothing further, Judge.
All right. Mr. Rogers, thank you so much for being here.
Yes, ma'am.
Your Honor, the state will call Dr. Lauren Scott.
Dr. Scott, if you'll come right up here, we'll get you sworn in, okay? I do. Dr. Scott, when you get up there, just make sure you're close to that microphone, okay? All right.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Would you please state and spell your name for the court reporter?
Dr. Lauren Scott. Lauren is Lauren. Scott is Scott.
And where do you work and what is your position there?
I'm an Associate Chief Medical Examiner at the Office of Medical Examiner of North Carolina in Raleigh.
And how long have you been working there?
In my current capacity since June of 2013, I did my final training year at the office as well.
Are you licensed to practice medicine in North Carolina?
I am, yes,
And when did you become licensed?
in 2012.
Do you have a specialty in medicine?
I do, yes.
And what is that?
Forensic pathology.
Where and when did you receive your medical training?
I completed medical school at the University at Buffalo in 2008. I then did 4 years of anatomic and clinical pathology residency at Dartmouth. My final training year was a fellowship in forensic pathology at the Office of the Chief Medical Examiner of North Carolina.
Can you describe what it means to be a pathologist or a forensic pathologist?
Pathology in general is the study of disease. As forensic pathologists, we focus on diseases of a non-natural manner. We investigate deaths where death is presumed to be due to non-natural means, so cases of accident, suicide, and homicide. We do this for various examinations, primary of which is the autopsy examination.
Have you testified before as an expert in forensic pathology?
I have, yes,
And approximately how many times?
about 95 times.
Do you have a curriculum vitae that describes your educational and professional experience?
I do, yes.
May I approach the witness, Your Honor?
You may.
Dr. Scott, I'll show you what I've marked for identification purposes as State's Exhibit 76 and ask you if you recognize this document.
Yes, State's Exhibit 76 is a copy of my resume or CV.
And it is is it a true and accurate copy of your CD?
It is, yes.
Your Honor, at this time, I would move to admit State 76 into evidence.
Any objection?
No objection, Judge.
76 will be admitted.
Thank you, Your Honor. At this time, I would tender Dr. Lauren Scott as an expert in forensic pathology.
Any objection?
No objection, Your Honor.
We will admit Dr. Scott as an expert in forensic pathology.
Thank you. Dr. Scott, what are your duties as a pathologist?
As mentioned, we determine cause and manner of death in cases presumed to be non-natural means, so any cases that are presumed to be accident, suicide, or homicide, and we do that primarily through the autopsy examination.
Who decides when an autopsy is completed?
It is a collaboration between our office and whoever is reporting a case to our office, so that could be law enforcement or a hospital personnel. And we will do an autopsy examination in all cases where there is a concern for homicide.
Can you describe for the jury what is done during an autopsy?
When the decedent first arrives at our office, they are given a unique number. That number will appear on all pieces of evidence, reports, and photographs that we take in conjunction with the case. Once they get that number, they receive an X-ray to look for any retained objects of evidentiary value, like bullets or projectiles. We then open their body bag, document any clothing, personal effects that they arrived at our office with, as well as any evidence of medical intervention that's on the body. We remove all the clothes, personal effects, evidence of medical intervention. Sorry. Sorry, what point were you at?
We remove all items, clothes, personal effects.
And evidence of medical intervention. We then proceed to our external examination. On the external examination, we look for any evidence of injury, as well as documenting characteristics like length and weight and hair color, any identifying characteristics like tattoos and scars. As we are documenting our findings, we do that both through some written notes and primarily through dictated notes. Once we are done with our external view of the body, we then proceed to an internal examination, making incisions into the chest cavity, into the abdominal cavity, and into the head, looking at the brain and the major organs in the chest and the abdominal cavity as they sit within the cavities, seeing if there are any abnormal fluid collections in the cavities, like collections of blood. We then remove all of the major organs, including the brain and the organs of the chest and abdomen. We are looking for any evidence of natural disease and any evidence of injuries, and documenting those injuries and natural diseases as we go along. In some cases, we will take samples for toxicology testing, so that's testing for drugs and alcohol to see if drugs or alcohol contributed to the death. In some cases, we'll also take small pieces of the organs to look at under the microscope. Once we are done with all of our ancillary testing, like the toxicology and the microscopic exam, we then compile a final written autopsy report documenting all of our findings and our opinion as to the cause and manner of death.
And are the procedures you just described in accordance with the generally accepted standards or guidelines in your field?
They are, yes.
And where do those standards or guidelines come from?
From the National Association of Medical Examiners.
Dr. Scott, turning your attention to this matter specifically, did you perform 2 autopsies in relation to this case?
I did, yes.
And did you perform an autopsy on Lyric Woods?
I did, yes.
What date did you complete that autopsy?
I'll refer to my report to remember that date. It was September 20th of 2022.
And could you briefly summarize the findings of your autopsy?
Ms. Woods had a total of 7 different gunshot wound tracks on and throughout her body. She had 1 gunshot wound that went through her right hand, through her right thumb, entering the back of the thumb, exiting from the front of the thumb. She had 1 gunshot wound that entered her left back. This wound injured her left lung, her aorta, or the major artery that brings blood away from the heart. and her liver before exiting from the right front of her abdomen. She also had a gunshot wound that entered her right upper back, went forwards through her right shoulder, fractured or broke her right clavicle or collarbone, and exited from her right upper chest. She had 2 gunshot wounds of her neck. Both of these entered on the right side of her neck. One exited on the left side of her neck. One exited on the central part of her neck. These both went through muscles in the front of the neck before exiting. She also had a gunshot wound that entered the front of her left shoulder and exited from her left upper arm, and a gunshot wound that entered the central part of her left upper arm and exited from the back of her left upper arm. There is also an abrasion or scrape on her right hand. I'm sorry, my misspoken there. That was her left hand. Abrasion or scrape on her left hand, which may have been from a gunshot wound that just scraped across the skin surface rather than entering the body, but it didn't quite have all the characteristics that allow me to confidently classify it as that. So this scrape on her hand may have just been a scrape from some other injury, or it may have been a scrape from a gunshot wound.
How do you determine the direction or path of travel of a gunshot wound?
We look at characteristics of the defects that are on the skin surface to determine if they're entrance or exit wounds. And I think we'll discuss that a little bit later when we have some pictures. We look at the injuries that are within the body cavities and within the organs and the internal tissues of the body, see where there is hemorrhage and where there is injury to trace a wound track from entrance to exit.
During the autopsy, were photographs taken of Miss Woods' injuries?
They were, yes.
May I approach the witness, Your Honor?
You may.
Dr. Scott, I'll show you what I've marked for identification purposes as States Exhibits 77 through 96 and ask you if you recognize these.
I do. If you can remind me of the numbers of these exhibits.
77 through 96.
States Exhibits 77 through 96 are photographs taken during the autopsy of Ms. Woods.
And would those photographs help you explain your findings from her autopsy to the jury?
They would, yes.
And are they fair and accurate representations of what you observed when you performed Ms. Woods' autopsy on September 20th of 2022?
They are, yes.
Your Honor, this time I would move States 77 through 96 into evidence as substantive evidence.
Any objections?
No objection, Judge.
All right, States 77 through 96 will be admitted into evidence as substantive evidence.
Dr. Scott, did you, you stated that you observed 7 gunshot wounds on Lyric Woods' body. Did you assign each gunshot wound an identifier?
It was 7 gunshot wound tracks, and yes, I arbitrarily labeled the wounds for descriptive purposes. There is, however, no way to tell which wound was first, second, third, fourth, which order they actually occurred in.
Your Honor, could I have the witness step down in front of the jury in order to publish these photos to the jury?
You may. Dr. Scott, you may step down. Mr. Trapp, you may move so you can see.
Thank you, Judge.
Dr. Scott, we'll start with State's Exhibit 77. Can you describe for the jury what's depicted in State's 77?
State's Exhibit 77 is what we term an identification photograph. In each autopsy, we will take a close-up view of the decedent's face for identification purposes. And you'll notice that in each photograph, there is the unique autopsy identifier number. In the case of Ms. Woods, it is B22-5939. That number will appear on all photographs, evidence, reports that we take and write in conjunction with the case.
Now, taking a look at States 78 and 79, which gunshot wound is depicted in these photographs?
State 78, what number was that?
78 and 79.
States Exhibit 78 and 79 show the gunshot wound that went through Ms. Wood's right hand, through her right thumb. Exhibit number 78, which is on your left, shows her entrance wound on the right thumb. The entrance wound is just above the autopsy identifier label. And her exit wound is on the underside of the right thumb, again, just above the autopsy identifier label. This wound, as it went through the thumb, fractured one of the bones in the thumb.
You mentioned entrance wounds and exit wounds. How are you able to determine what's an entrance wound and an exit wound?
An entrance wound will be more round, oval, regular in appearance than an exit wound, which will have a more irregular appearance, although not always. A entrance wound will often have an area of abrasion around it. As the bullet's entering the skin surface, it rubs up against the skin surface, wearing away the outer layer of the skin. An exit wound would generally not have such an abrasion unless the body is pressed up against some object when the bullet is exiting. One of the things that is most helpful for us is whether or not the wound reapproximates. So with an entrance wound, I can stretch the skin in every direction and there will still be a gap left. With an exit wound, if I stretch the skin in a certain direction, it will leave no gap. The skin will reapproximate or close back together.
Dr. Scott, you're doing a great job. And I know it's nerve-wracking to be up in front of people, but just slow it down just a tad bit. Thank you.
Now looking at States Exhibits 80 and 81, can you describe what's depicted in these exhibits for the jury?
States Exhibits 80 and 81 show the entrance gunshot wound on Ms. Wood's left back. The photograph on your left is a further away view of that gunshot wound, showing the location on her mid-left back. Her left shoulder is towards the left of the photograph. Her head is towards the top of the photograph. And the entrance wound is above the autopsy identifier number. A close-up view of that wound is on your right-hand side. Again, it is above the autopsy identifier label. It shows the characteristics of an entrance wound. It is round to oval in shape. It has an abrasion rim where the bullet's rubbing up against the skin, wearing away the outer layer of the skin. And if I can stretch the skin in every direction, I can do so and still leave a gap, not completely reapproximate that wound.
Were you able to determine a, oh, sorry, I did just. taking a look at states 82 and 83, can you describe what's depicted in these photos?
States exhibits 82 and 83 show the exit wound that corresponds with the entrance wound that we just saw. So again, the entrance wound was on Ms. Wood's left mid-back. This exit wound is on her right front abdomen. In the photograph on the left, you can see an overall view. Her right shoulder would be up towards the top left of the photograph. Her left arm is towards the right side of the photograph. And the exit wound is just above the autopsy identifier number. On the left side photograph, you can see a close-up view of that exit wound. Again, this wound track entered the left back, went through the left lung, injured the aorta, or the major vessel that brings blood away from the heart, then went through her liver and exited from the front of the right abdomen. And you can see the characteristics of an exit wound in the close-up view. It is more irregular in shape. It doesn't have that nice, regular, round, oval appearance like the entrance wound did. If I could stretch the skin, I could stretch it and close up that wound and not leave a gap, and there is no abrasion rim around it or area where the bullet's rubbing up against the skin.
Taking a look at states exhibit 84 and 85, can you describe what's depicted in these photographs?
States exhibit 84 and 85 show an entrance and exit wound that correspond with one another. The photograph on the left, which I believe is states exhibit 84, shows an entrance wound on the back of Ms. Wood's right shoulder. In this photograph, her right shoulder would be towards the top of the photograph. Her back would be down towards the bottom of the photograph. Her left side would be towards the left of the photograph, and her right side towards the right side of the photograph. This wound is on the back of her right shoulder, right upper back, and it is again above the autopsy identifier label. It again shows those characteristics of an entrance wound: oval appearance, abrasion rim, does not reapproximate. This wound subsequently went through her shoulder and exited from the front of her right upper chest after going through her right collarbone or clavicle. The exit wound for this wound track is depicted in States Exhibit 85 on your left-hand side. It is again right above the autopsy identifier label, and it has the characteristics of a typical exit wound.
I will also reuse States Exhibit 85 as well as 86 and ask if you can describe the additional injuries we're seeing in States 85.
States Exhibit 85 additionally shows entrance wounds on the right side of Ms. Wood's neck. In the exit wound, which corresponded to the entrance wound on the back of her right shoulder, is on her right upper chest and is above the autopsy identifier label. On the right side of her neck, you can see two additional entrance wounds. There are two wounds that went through her neck, entering on the right side. The one that is closer to her middle exited from the left side of her neck. The one that is further from her middle exited from the front part of her neck. It was underneath the chin, so so you cannot see it in this photograph. And these wounds both went through muscle in the front part of the neck.
And in states 86 and 87, I switched sides on 86, 87.
States Exhibit 86 and 87 show close-up views of the entrance wounds on Ms. Lyric's neck. States Exhibit 86 shows the wound that was closer to the front. States Exhibit 87 shows the wound that was closer to the back of her neck.
And how about states 89?
States Exhibit 89 shows an overall view of those two entrance wounds on Ms. Lyric's right neck. So in this photograph, the front part of her neck would be towards the right of the photograph. The back part of her neck would be towards the left of the photograph. And you can see the two entrance wounds just above the autopsy identifier label. The one towards the right of the photograph is the one that is closer to the midline or her mid portion, and the one that is on the left side of the photograph is further from her midline.
And how about states exhibit 90?
States Exhibit 90 is a view of the left side of Ms. Wood's neck. Her head would be towards the top of the photograph, her chest towards the bottom of the photograph, the front part of her neck towards the left side of the photograph, and the back part of her neck towards the right side of the photograph. So we're looking at the left side of her neck. Above the autopsy identifier label is the exit gunshot wound. This corresponds to one of the entrances that was on the right side of her neck.
Looking again at states exhibit 85, can you describe what we're seeing on Ms. Woods' face here?
And States Exhibit 85 shows the entrance wounds on the right side of her neck. On her right cheek are small red marks. These red marks are made by burned and unburned gunpowder particles striking the skin surface and leaving tiny scrapes or abrasions. We term this stippling, and it is the burned and unburned flecks of gunpowder striking the skin surface. This indicates that the gunshot wound was close enough for those burned and unburned flecks of gunpowder to reach the skin surface. The exact determination of wound distance needs to be done through test fires in the lab. But when I'm seeing the stippling, it means the wound is, or the gun was held usually within a few feet of the victim.
Taking a look at states 91 and 92, can you describe for the jury what's depicted in both of those?
States Exhibits 91 and 92 show the entrance and exit wounds that go from the front part of the left shoulder to the back of the left arm. State's Exhibit 91 shows the entrance wound on the front part of Ms. Wood's left shoulder. The side of her arm would be towards the left of the photograph. Her chest would be towards the right of the photograph. Top of the shoulder towards the top and chest towards the bottom. The entrance wound is again above the autopsy identifier label and shows the characteristics of an entrance wound. This wound went through muscle of the shoulder and left upper arm and exited from the back of the left upper arm. In State's Exhibit 92, you can see this exit wound above the autopsy identifier label on the back of Ms. Wood's left upper arm. And it entered her left shoulder and exited from the back of her left upper arm.
And in States 93 and 94,
State's Exhibits 93 and 94 depict the gunshot wound that went through Ms. Wood's left upper arm. State's Exhibit 93 on your left-hand side shows the entrance wound on the middle part of her left upper arm. State's Exhibit 94 on your right-hand side shows the exit wound on the back part of her left upper arm, again above the autopsy identifier label. For this particular wound, a portion of the bullet exited and a portion of the bullet was retained within the arm and recovered at the time of autopsy.
and Dr. Scott, did you photograph the portion of the projectile that was recovered from that area?
I did, yes.
And could you describe what's depicted in States 95?
State's Exhibit 95 shows that portion of the bullet or projectile that was recovered from Ms. Wood's left upper arm. Again, a portion of that bullet exited and a portion stayed within the arm.
And could you describe what's depicted in States Exhibit 96?
State's Exhibit 96 is a view of the back of Ms. Wood's left hand. This shows the scrape or abrasion that I spoke of before, which might be from a gunshot which, instead of entering the skin, grazed or scraped across the skin surface. Since she had some decompositional changes, it doesn't have enough characteristics for me to say that's definitely what it was from. So it could be from a gunshot wound scraping against her hand, or it could just be from another blunt force injury or object without a sharp cutting edge impacting the skin surface with enough force that it breaks away the outer layer of the skin.
Thank you. Dr. Scott, other than the injuries that you've just described, were there other injuries that you observed during your examination?
There were a few small additional scrapes and bruises on her body, specifically on her right knee.
And do you have any opinion about what might have caused those?
Those are caused by some blunt force injury. I can't say any more other than that an object, excuse me, an object without a sharp cutting edge struck the skin surface, or the skin surface struck an object without a sharp cutting edge to create those injuries.
Dr. Scott, in reference to the, we can take gunshot wound 2 for an example. There were some areas around the exit gunshot wound that you describe as superficial epidermal abrasions. Can you describe what you observed about those injuries?
There are areas where the skin was worn away, the outer layer of the skin or the epidermis was worn away surrounding that injury. I think a lot of what I was seeing there was due to post-mortem injury, so injury that occurred after death, largely through the activity of insects. It is possible that there was some object that struck the body surface there or pressed up against the body surface to cause those injuries.
And based on the autopsy of Lyric Woods that you've just described, were you able to form an opinion as to cause of death?
I was, yes.
And did you prepare a written report summarizing your findings and conclusions in this case?
I did, yes.
Your Honor, may I approach the witness?
You may.
Dr. Scott, I'll show you what's been marked for identification purposes as State's Exhibit 97 and ask you if you recognize this document.
Yes, State's Exhibit 97 is a copy of the autopsy report that I prepared for Ms. Woods.
And is it a true and accurate copy of your report?
It is, yes.
Your Honor, this time I would move State's Exhibit 97 into evidence as substantive evidence.
Any objection?
No objection, Judge.
All right, States 97 will be admitted into evidence as substantive evidence.
Thank you, Your Honor. Dr. Scott, did you also have an opportunity to review a toxicology report as a part of forming your opinion in this case?
I did, yes.
And can you describe what a toxicology analysis is?
Toxicology analysis tests for alcohol and sometimes other drugs that were present in the body at the time of death.
And what is the purpose of completing a toxicology analysis as a part of an autopsy?
We perform toxicology analyses to see if there are any substances that would be contributory to the death.
May I approach the witness again, Your Honor?
You may.
Thank you. Dr. Scott, I'll show you what I've marked for identification purposes as State's Exhibit 98 and ask you if you recognize this document.
Yes, State's Exhibit 98 is a copy of the toxicology report for Ms. Woods.
And is that a true and accurate copy of the toxicology report that was generated in this case?
It is, yes.
Your Honor, at this time I would move State's 98 into evidence.
Any objection?
No objection, Judge.
All right, States 98 will be admitted for substantive evidence, yes?
Yes. Thank you. Dr. Scott, what were the results of the decedent's toxicology report?
In the case of Ms. Woods, we only tested for alcohols, not for other substances, which is our policy when we have an obvious cause of death, such as gunshot wounds at the time of initial autopsy. She had 40 milligrams per deciliter of ethanol or alcohol in her postmortem blood. That equates to a 0.04% blood alcohol concentration.
And what, if any, conclusions can you draw from those results?
Given that she had decompositional changes, I cannot draw many conclusions from those. As part of the decomposition process, there's fermentation that occurs that can produce alcohol. I cannot tell if the alcohol I'm seeing in her system is due to alcohol that was produced as part of that decomposition fermentation process, or whether it was due to alcohol that she consumed before her death.
Dr. Scott, what is your opinion as to cause of death in this case?
multiple gunshot wounds.
Based on the injuries you've described, how long would someone remain alive after receiving those injuries?
It can vary dependent on particular characteristics, given that she had a number of gunshot wounds going through large areas of muscle, as well as a gunshot wound which went through 2 major organs and a major vessel. I anticipate that she would have at least lost consciousness within several minutes after the injuries, possibly sooner, and that she likely also would have died within several minutes. But there are exceptions to every rule. I have seen people who have lived for several hours after getting a gunshot wound straight through the heart.
And which of these wounds that Ms. Woods received would you categorize as the most serious?
The most serious was the wound which entered her left back and exited from her right abdomen, going through her left lung, her aorta, or major vessel that carries blood away from the heart, and her liver.
And what sort of consequences would those injuries have?
Those injuries would have caused bleeding within the body cavities, which I did appreciate at the time of autopsy. In addition to the blood loss itself, when there is blood within body cavities, it presses on the organs, preventing the organs from functioning properly, preventing the lungs from expanding as they are supposed to, preventing the heart from beating as it is supposed to, because of that pressure of the fluid on the organs.
And how much blood did you observe when you did your internal examination
Observed
from that injury?
Observed 500 milliliters of blood in her left chest cavity, 300 milliliters in her right chest cavity, and 500 milliliters in her abdominal cavity.
I'm obviously not a doctor. Is that a lot?
That is a significant amount of blood, and we also need to take into consideration that that does not represent the total amount of blood that she lost, since there is some blood that comes out through the wounds, is left on her clothing, the scene, etc., not within her body cavities.
Thank you, Dr. Scott. Did you also perform an autopsy on Devin Clark?
I did, yes.
And when did you perform that autopsy?
Refer to my report again. That autopsy was also performed on September 20th of 2022.
And did you perform his autopsy before or after Ms. Woods's, if you remember?
That was after Ms. Woods' autopsy.
Could you briefly summarize the findings of Mr. Clark's autopsy?
He had a total of 6 gunshot wound tracks on his body. There was a wound which entered his right upper back, went through his back into his neck, fractured 2 of the vertebrae in his neck, also injured the right internal jugular vein and right common carotid artery. These are the vessels, 2 major vessels that bring blood to and from the head, to and from the heart. The vein brings the blood from the head to the heart, and the artery brings the blood from the heart to the head. So both that vein and artery were injured in his right neck. And this wound exited from the side of his right neck. So again, entered the right upper back, went through the neck, injured 2 major vessels, a vein and an artery in the side of his neck, and exited from the right side of his neck. There was also a gunshot wound which entered his right upper back, further from his midline. This wound went through his back, through his shoulder, fractured his right first rib, before exiting from his right upper chest above the right collarbone or clavicle. He additionally had a wound that entered his right buttock, went through muscle of his right thigh, and exited from the front of his right thigh. Another gunshot wound entered the outside of his left foot, fractured bones in the foot and the ankle, and lodged within the foot. So I recovered that bullet from the foot. do believe, looking back, I do believe I misspoke with one of the gunshot wounds. So I will correct myself now. The wound that entered the right upper back did not actually exit. It lodged above the right clavicle. So the one which entered from the right upper back went through the back and fractured the right rib. Did not actually exit. The bullet was retained within the body above the right clavicle or right collarbone. Returning to a new gunshot wound, he had a wound of the back of his head. This wound went through his right neck, through his right cheek, and exited from his right cheek. He also had a gunshot wound that entered above his right clavicle, went through tissue of the right shoulder, went through the right scapula or shoulder blade, and the projectile was recovered from muscle of his right back. So there were gunshot wounds in his right shoulder going in two opposite directions. One was entering and lodged in his back. One entered from the back and lodged in his front.
And during the autopsy, were photographs taken of Mr. Clark's injuries?
They were, yes.
May I approach the witness, Your Honor?
You may.
Dr. Scott, I'll show you what have been marked for identification purposes as State's Exhibits 99 through 113, and ask you if you recognize those.
State's Exhibits 99 through 113 are photographs that were taken during the autopsy of Mr. Clark.
And would those photographs help you explain the injuries that you've just described to the jury?
They would, yes.
And are they a fair and accurate depiction of the injuries you observed on Mr. Clark during your autopsy?
They are, yes.
Your Honor, this time I would move State's Exhibits 99 through 113 into evidence as substantive evidence.
Any objection?
No objection, Judge.
States 99 through 113 will be admitted as substantive evidence.
Thank you, Your Honor, and may Dr. Scott step down.
Yes, Dr. Scott.
Dr. Scott, beginning with State's Exhibit 99, can you describe for the jury what's depicted in this exhibit?
State's Exhibit 99 is the identification photograph for Mr. Clark. Again, in every autopsy, we take a close-up of the face for identification purposes, and every photograph that we take will have a unique autopsy identifier number on it. For Mr. Clark, that number is B22-5940. And you'll see that number on all photographs that we take in conjunction with this case, as well as all pieces of evidence that we take and all reports that we write.
Beginning with State's Exhibits 100 and 101, can you describe what's depicted in these photographs?
States Exhibits 100 and 101 show the entrance wound, one of the entrance wounds on Mr. Clark's right upper back. In the photograph towards the left, which is States Exhibit 100, there is an overall view of where this is located on his body. His right shoulder is towards the right side of the photograph. His head is towards the left top of the photograph. So this is a view of his back and the back of his right shoulder. That entrance wound is just above the autopsy identifier label on his right upper back. States Exhibit 101 shows a close-up view of that entrance wound on Mr. Clark's right upper back. Again, it has the typical characteristics of an entrance wound. It's nice and oval, regular, has an abrasion around it where the bullet's rubbing up against the skin surface as it enters, and will not reapproximate. So if I stretch the skin in every direction, it will not leave a, or it will leave a gap.
And in States Exhibit 100, can you describe for the jury what we're seeing with regard to Mr. Clark's skin?
With Mr. Clark's skin in States Exhibit 100, you're seeing areas of decompositional change. So his epidermal layer is being worn away, and that was just occurred post-mortem. It is not indicative of any injury. It's just a post-mortem decompositional change that the outer layer of the skin starts to rub away after a certain amount of time.
And looking at States 102 and 103, can you describe for the jury what's depicted in these photos?
States Exhibits 102 and 103 show the exit gunshot wound that corresponds to the entrance that we just saw. This exit gunshot wound is on Mr. Wood's right neck. In States Exhibit 103, which is on your right, you can see an overall view of the location of that wound. It is a view of the right side of Mr. Wood's face and the right side of his neck. Gunshot wound again entered from his right upper back, went through his back into his neck, injured the right internal jugular vein and right common carotid artery. Those are the two major vessels that carry blood to and from the head and the heart, and then exited from the right side of his neck. And States Exhibit 102, which is on your left, is a close-up view of that exit gunshot wound on the right side of Mr. Clark's neck.
And taking a look at States Exhibit 104, can you describe for the jury what's depicted in this photograph?
States Exhibit 104 shows the other entrance gunshot wound on Mr. Clark's right back. This one was further from his midline than the one that we saw previously. In this photograph, you can see the entrance wound just above the autopsy identifier label. The right side of his body is towards the right side of the photograph, left side of his body towards the left side, since it's a view of his back. His right shoulder is towards the right top of the photograph. This entrance wound corresponds to a recovered projectile. This is the one that I initially misspoke on and said it had an exit. It did not. It had a retained projectile. This wound track went through the right shoulder, injured the right rib, and lodged just above the right clavicle or collarbone.
And what's in States 105?
States Exhibit 105 is that projectile that I recovered from just above Mr. Clark's right collarbone.
describe for the jury what's depicted in States Exhibits 106 and 107.
States Exhibit 106 and 107 show entrance and exit wounds from Mr. Clark's right buttock to the front of Mr. Clark's right thigh. And the left-hand photograph, which is States Exhibit 106, there is the entrance wound just above the autopsy identifier label. Mr. Clark's right buttock is being held up by the gloved hand to see the entrance wound just underneath the buttock. His right leg is extending towards the bottom of the photograph. His left buttock will be towards the left side of the photograph. His right hip towards the right side of the photograph. So it's a view of the back of his right thigh and right buttock. Again, the entrance wound is just above there. That wound subsequently went through muscle of the right thigh and exited from the front of the right thigh. That exit wound on the front of Mr. Clark's right thigh is depicted in States Exhibit 107, which is the photograph on your right-hand side.
And how about in States Exhibit 108?
States Exhibit 108 is a view of the outside of Mr. Wood's left foot. His left toes would be towards the bottom left of the photograph, and his left heel towards the bottom right of the photograph. The entrance gunshot wound is just above the autopsy identifier label. It looks slightly different than some of the other entrance wounds that we've seen, since it has areas where the skin is split on either side of the entrance defect. The entrance defect itself is still a nice oval, but the skin is split on either side of it. This wound track subsequently went into the foot and ankle, fractured bones in Mr. Clark's left foot and ankle, and then lodged within the foot.
And did you recover a projectile from that area?
Yes.
And what's depicted in States 109?
States Exhibit 109 is a photograph of the projectile that was recovered from Mr. Clark's left foot. It had separated into two different pieces, but both of those pieces were retained within the foot.
Ms. Orr, before you begin the next one, we're going to go ahead and take a break right now, okay? Dr. Scott, if you don't mind me taking the stand. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we'll take our morning recess just a little bit early. Same rules apply as yesterday. If y'all would please just leave your notebooks in your chairs at this time. Everybody else, please remain seated. We'll let our jurors exit at this time. It'll be about 15 minutes. All right, all our jurors have currently left the courtroom. I cannot imagine testimony any more difficult or emotionally damaging than autopsy testimony. It is scientific in nature toward people who are loved. But as I had mentioned earlier, this testimony has to be heard by the jury, and I cannot have the jury distracted by what is going on in the audience. I know Mr. Carter's family is here, and the only thing I can say is that there's no reason for any family to endure this particular testimony. I have talked to the DA, and with my profound, again, sympathies for any family members having to go through that. There are some folks in the gallery who I'm just going to ask until we finish this section of testimony that they step out. Again, no family member is required to show a level of toughness that requires them to endure this particular testimony. I've talked to the DA. I understand what you're going through. But again, I have to have the jury focused on what's in front of them. So we're going to take a 15-minute recess. We'll come back and we'll resume testimony. Anything else that we need to address on behalf of the state?
No, Your Honor, thank you.
On behalf of the defense?
No, Judge, thank you.
We'll be in recess for 15 minutes. Dr. Carter, you can stay there if you'd like.
Okay. Paige, did you hear that? About that Michigan's group. You have written down what it is?
I did do them as a group. I'm gonna put it on the record that that one was left out, just so it's clear.
In the testimony.
87 to 89. Yeah.
87 to 89. Yep.
I was looking for it, and I'm like, it's not here.
Sorry for sometimes talking too fast.
I mean, it happens, I get it. Thank you. It's mostly when I don't like these pictures, but I can't see the pictures. So when you're like, the right side of the phone is the left side of the way I'm like, oh, wait, she's Thank you, though, I appreciate it. You're generally fairly measured. It's very complex. These words, not these words. And the funny thing is, it's not this one. I get that one. It's the little words in between that often right down. Those are the ones that we don't hold on to super well. The really long ones. Thank you. Can we just hold them? Thank you. Just these are my initials. Yes. I will not conceal it. And I also know when I stop and go, hey, can So I try not to do that.
And I just wanted to apologize. I met Mr. Clark's family, and I misspoke, and I'm sorry about that. All right. Everybody who is going to remain, I appreciate you staying here. Just make sure you want to do that. If anybody would like to step out right now, it's okay. You can go ahead and do that. All right. Anything else we need to address on behalf of the state?
Yes, Your Honor. In my group of exhibits 77 through 96, which were the autopsy photos for Miss Woods, I skipped number 88. Number 88 does not exist, so I wanted to make sure that was clear on the record.
Thank you for catching that. Madam Clerk, if you will just note that 88 will be an unused number. Thank you.
Thank you. That's all.
For the defense.
Nothing from the defense. Thank you, Judge.
All right. Let's go ahead and bring our jurors back in, please. Jerry? Looks like we're ready to proceed with the evidence. Dr. Scott, if you'd step down again, please. And Ms. Orr, the jury will be with you.
Thank you, Your Honor. Dr. Scott, looking at State's Exhibit 110, can you describe what we're seeing in this photo?
State's Exhibit 110 is a view of the entrance wound on Mr. Clark's back right head. In this photograph, the top of his head would be towards the top of the photograph. His neck is towards the bottom of the photograph. The right side of his head towards the right side of the photograph, and the left side of his head towards the left side of the photograph. The entrance wound is just above the autopsy identifier label on his back right head.
And how about in State's Exhibit 111?
State's Exhibit 111 shows a view of the right side of Mr. Clark's face. An exit wound is on his right cheek, just above the autopsy identifier label. This exit wound corresponds to the entrance on the back right head. This gunshot wound entered back right head, went through the upper part of his right neck, through his right cheek, and exited from his right cheek.
And in State's Exhibit 112?
State's Exhibit 112 is a view of a gunshot wound and entrance wound just above Mr. Clark's right clavicle or collarbone. The entrance wound is just above the autopsy identifier photo. His face is obviously towards the top of the photograph, his right shoulder towards the right top of the photograph, and his central neck and chest towards the left side of the photograph. This entrance wound is again just above the autopsy identifier number, above his right collarbone. This gunshot wound went into his upper chest, went towards the back, went through his right shoulder blade or scapula, and lodged in his right back. So I recovered a projectile or bullet from the muscle of his right back.
And what's depicted in State's 113?
State's Exhibit 113 is the bullet or projectile that I recovered from Mr. Clark's right back that corresponded to the entrance above his right collarbone or clavicle.
That's all the photographs. Take the stand. Thank you. Dr. Scott, other than the injuries you've just described using the photographs, were there any other injuries that you observed to Mr. Clark?
He had a few minor injuries. There were abrasions or scrapes below his right lip and on his left abdomen.
Based on the autopsy of Mr. Clark that you've just described, were you able to form an opinion as to the cause of his death?
I was. A gunshot wound of the back/neck with multiple other gunshot wounds contributory to death.
And did you prepare a written report summarizing your findings and conclusions in this case?
I did, yes.
May I approach the witness, Your Honor?
You may.
I'll show you what I've marked for identification purposes as State's Exhibit 114 and ask you if you recognize this.
State's Exhibit 114 is a copy of the autopsy report that I prepared for Mr. Clark.
And is that a complete and accurate copy of your autopsy report?
It is, yes.
Your Honor, this time I would move State's Exhibit 114 into evidence as substantive evidence.
Any objection?
No objection, Judge.
States 114 will be admitted as substantive evidence.
And did you also have an opportunity to review a toxicology report as a part of forming your opinion in this case?
I did, yes.
May I approach again?
You may.
Thank you. Show you what I've marked for identification purposes as States Exhibit 115, and ask you if you recognize this document.
States Exhibit 115 is a copy of the toxicology report for Mr. Clark.
And is that a fair and accurate copy of the toxicology report you reviewed in forming your opinion?
It is, yes.
All right, this time I would move States 115 into evidence as substantive evidence.
Any objection? All right, States 115 will be admitted as substantive evidence.
Dr. Scott, what were the results of Mr. Clark's toxicology?
Mr. Clark's toxicology showed 80 milligrams per deciliter of ethanol or alcohol in his blood at the time of death. This is equivalent to a blood alcohol concentration of 0.08%.
And what, if any, conclusions can you draw from that result?
As with Ms. Woods, no definite conclusions can be drawn. He also had decompositional changes at the time of autopsy. With decomposition, there is fermentation that occurs. This can produce alcohol after death through decomposition, so I cannot determine if the alcohol that's present in his system was due to production after death or if it was due to consumption of alcohol prior to death.
And what's your opinion as to cause of death in this case?
A gunshot wound of the back/neck with multiple other gunshot wounds contributory to death.
And which of these injuries you've described was the most serious?
The most serious was the gunshot wound which entered his right upper back and subsequently went into his right neck, injuring the right internal jugular vein and right common carotid artery, those two major vessels carrying blood to and from heart and head.
And what would be the consequences of those injuries?
The consequences would be bleeding or exsanguination from those two major vessels.
How long would someone remain alive after receiving that type of injury?
With injuries to two major vessels, again, I would expect unconsciousness to occur within several minutes and death to usually occur within several minutes after that. However, there are exceptions to every rule, so I cannot say for sure that that occurred in this case.
Did you perform sexual assault evidence collection on both decedents in this case?
I did, yes.
And can you describe that process?
Yes, with a sexual assault kit collection, swabs are taken of the oral cavity, of the anal cavity, of the external genitalia. If it is a female, of the vaginal cavity. We also take pulled hair samples from the scalp and from the pubic region, as well as pubic hair combings. Certain times we will also take swabs of the hands and breasts.
And how do you decide when to perform a sexual assault kit?
A sexual assault kit is performed by our office when it is requested by law enforcement.
And what do you do with the swabs that you collect from a sexual assault kit?
The swabs and hair samples are placed in a box. That box is sealed with evidence tape, and it is given by me or a representative from our office to law enforcement.
And did you do that in this case with any samples that you collected?
Yes.
May I approach the witness?
Yes.
Dr. Scott, I'll show you what I've marked for identification purposes as States Exhibits 16 and 17 and ask you if you recognize these items. 116 and 117.
States Exhibits 116 and 117 are the sexual assault kits that I collected for Ms. Woods and Mr. Clark.
And which is which?
117 is the sexual assault kit for Ms. Woods. 116 is the sexual assault kit for Mr. Clark.
And how are you able to tell that those are the sexual assault kits that you collected?
I can see my signature over the evidence tape seal that I placed on the box. I also see our unique autopsy identifier labels on the box with my initials on them.
Thank you very much. Are there other items that you turn over to law enforcement at the conclusion of an autopsy?
Yes, for a potential homicide case, we will also collect a blood spot card, spotting some of the decedent's blood on an absorbent card so that a sample of the decedent's DNA is saved. We hand that over to law enforcement, as well as any closed personal effects that the decedent came in with, and any projectiles or bullets that we recovered during the autopsy.
And what's the purpose of collecting the blood card?
The blood card is collected so that the lab will have a sample of the decedent's DNA if they need it for any comparisons.
And how is that collected?
A few drops of the decedent's blood are dropped onto an absorbent card.
May I approach the witness, Your Honor?
Yes, ma'am.
Dr. Scott, I'll show you what I've marked for identification purposes as States Exhibits 118 and 119, and ask you if you recognize first the exterior of these items.
I do not recognize the exterior of the items 118 and 119.
And why is that?
The items that I collect as evidence are sometimes placed in another envelope by the lab.
And how do you typically package the items that you collect?
I package them in an envelope with evidence tape over the envelope and my signature over the evidence tape.
For the record, I am removing the contents of States Exhibit 118. And I'll ask you, Dr. Scott, do you recognize what's included in States Exhibit 118?
Yes, States Exhibit 118 is the blood card that I took for evidence for Ms. Woods.
And does it appear to be in the same packaging that you placed it in at the crime lab? At the medical examiner's office?
It does, yes.
Thank you. And I will do the same for States Exhibit 119. And for the record, I'll remove the contents of States Exhibit 119 and ask you if you recognize this item.
States Exhibit 119 is the blood card that I collected for evidence for Mr. Clark.
Thank you. What other items do you provide to law enforcement?
We provide the clothing and personal effects, if there were any, and any bullets or projectiles that were recovered during the autopsy.
May I approach the witness?
Yes, ma'am.
Sorry. And Dr. Scott, how do you package recovered projectiles?
The projectile is placed in an envelope, and evidence tape is placed over the envelope, and my signature is placed over the evidence tape.
And do you recognize the exterior packaging of State's Exhibits 120 through 123?
I do not know.
Taking first State's Exhibit 120, I will remove the item from the exterior packaging and ask if you recognize this item. You can see it.
State's Exhibit 120 is the projectile that I recovered from the arm of Ms. Woods.
And does it appear to be in the same or similar condition as when you recovered it?
It does, yes.
Thank you. And for the record, I will remove the contents of State's Exhibit 121 and ask you if you recognize these items.
State's Exhibit 121 are the two pieces of the projectile that I recovered from the left foot of Mr. Clark.
And are those in the same or similar condition as when you recovered them?
They are, yes.
And how about the contents of State's Exhibit 122, which for the record, I will remove from the exterior packaging.
State's Exhibit 122 is the projectile that I recovered from the front part of Mr. Clark's right shoulder, the projectile that was just above his right clavicle or collarbone.
You can't quite see that because they've covered up the...
Yeah, I can't see the projectile, but I can see my label that was on it as well as my signature.
Thank you. And finally, the contents of State's Exhibit 123. Are you able to recognize that item?
State's Exhibit 123 is the projectile that I recovered from Mr. Clark's right back.
And is it in the same or similar condition as when you recovered it?
It is, yes.
Your Honor, this time I would move States 120 through 123 into evidence.
Any objection?
No objection.
States 120 through 123 will be admitted into evidence.
And I would also move States 118
Any objection?
No objection to state's exhibits 118 and 119.
118 and 119 will be admitted into evidence.
Wait up just a moment, Your Honor.
Yes, ma'am.
Your Honor, those are all the questions I have for Dr. Scott. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Trapp, cross-examination.
Thank you, Judge. Good morning, Dr. Scott.
Good morning.
You started your conversation with Ms. Orr talking about your experience in education. You mentioned that you became licensed in 2012 and started your current position in 2013.
That's correct, yes.
And between that time of becoming licensed in 2012 and 2013, were you training, interning, being mentored to be a medical examiner, or were you practicing as a doctor in a different way?
I was in my final training year, which is a fellowship in forensic pathology at the Office of the Chief Medical Examiner of North Carolina.
And so you've been a medical examiner for going on 13 years now. Is that about right?
And that's correct.
And I assume in those 13 years, you've probably performed at least 1,000 autopsies?
Close to about 2,800 now.
Okay. More than 1,000. And so you have had experience dealing with individuals with different types of injuries and different causes and manners of death. Is that right?
And that's correct, yes.
So you talked about, I'll first go with the toxicology and then work my way backwards. For each individual, you did a toxicology report. Is that right?
I reviewed the toxicology report. The report's written by our toxicologist.
And so you don't actually perform that test, but do you give them the blood or give them the material that they test for the toxicology information?
Yes, I provide the samples that are tested.
Okay. And you mentioned that it was blood, that it wasn't some other item that you give them. Is that right?
The levels that I quoted were for blood. For Mr. Clark, I believe they also did testing on the urine sample that I gave.
Okay. And you mentioned, I think for Mr. Clark, it was about 80 milliliters?
Yes.
And then for Ms. Woods, it was 40 milliliters. Is that right?
40 milligrams per deciliter, yeah.
Okay. And you had discussed that you can't really determine what was the cause of that alcohol result. Is that right?
And that's correct. It might have been from consuming alcohol prior to death. It might have been from production of alcohol through the decomposition process.
Typically, when you do autopsies and this information gets sent for toxicology, do you test for any other drugs?
It is our office policy in cases where there is an obvious cause of death, such as gunshot wounds at the time of autopsy, that we only test for alcohols unless additional testing is requested by somebody outside the office.
And in this case, there wasn't additional testing requested?
There was not, no.
Could additional testing verify or determine if this alcohol was consumed prior to or was a result of decomposition after death?
It could not, no.
Now, when looking at each of these individuals, Ms. Woods and Mr. Clark separate, you talked about entrance wounds and exit wounds.
That's correct, yes.
And I think the word you used was a wound tract, not just a wound. Is that right?
And that's correct. A wound tract would correspond to the entrance and the exit and the path through the body.
And in your report, and believe here on the stand, you talked about how you can't really determine which injury occurred first or which wound tract was one or which wound tract was two. But in your autopsy, can you tell or determine maybe a wound occurred while a person was alive versus post-mortem?
The wounds that I saw in both decedents had hemorrhage or bleeding within the wound tracks, which would indicate to me that they were alive at the time that the wounds occurred.
And then you talked about entrance wounds are more oval and maybe uniform, and even the idea of stretching and coming back together. Is that right?
Yes, with an entrance wound, if you stretch it, it will not come back together. With an exit wound, if you stretch the skin in a certain direction, it will come back together.
Now, for Ms. Woods, you mentioned that there were 7 tracts versus Mr. Clark, you said there were 6.
That's correct, yes.
In looking at these tracks, can you determine whether or not one bullet created an entrance for versus a bullet maybe having 2 entrance wounds?
It is possible for a bullet to have 2 entrance wounds, especially when there are wounds that go through an extremity, like a hand or an arm. It's possible for a wound to go through a hand and then re-enter elsewhere on the body. I do note in my report for Ms. Woods that the gunshot wound that went through her right thumb very well could have re-entered someplace else on the body, depending on where her hand was in relation to the rest of her body. And there is no way for me to tell at autopsy where that hand was in relation to the rest of her body. If that hand was overlying her neck where she had entrance wounds, it's possible for a gunshot wound to have gone through her hand, exited, and then re-entered through the neck. So that is a possibility.
And in your experience, you mentioned you've done a lot of autopsies. Are you able to determine what type of bullet or projectile caused the injury, maybe caliber or size?
The caliber of the bullet is beyond my level of expertise. That is done by the ballistics expert from the lab.
When speaking about Miss Woods, you talked about an injury to the neck and that it had stippling or burns, and that kind of showed the distance of that injury. You recall that?
It didn't have burns. It had stippling, which is burned and unburned flecks of gunpowder that strike the skin surface and leave tiny abrasions or scrapes where they hit the skin surface.
But in all the other injuries for Miss Woods and for the injuries for Mr. Clark, you did not mention such a term of stippling or burn or close in proximity. Is that right?
That's correct. For all of the other entrance wounds, aside from the 2 on Ms. Wood's neck, there was no soot or stippling present on the skin surface. This usually indicates that the gun was held more than several feet away when it was being fired at the decedent. However, we can never completely rule out that there was some intermediary object in between gun and body surface that absorbed those gunpowder particles, preventing them from hitting the body surface. Even a thick layer of clothing can serve as an intermediary object that absorbs those gunpowder particles, making it look like a more distant range shot when really it was closer, but that intermediary object was in between gun and skin surface.
But to be clear, we can't tell the distance of any of those other guns.
That's correct. For the other wounds, we determine them indeterminate range, meaning I can't tell what range they were. I can't tell if they were far enough away that none of those particles are striking the skin surface, or if they were closer, but there's some object blocking those particles from hitting the skin surface.
And we talked about the manner and cause of death. Those are the things that you can determine.
That's correct, yes.
And we talked about cause for both individuals. That would be gunshot wounds. Is that correct?
Yes.
And then manner, that's like the term homicide. Is that right?
Yes. For manner of death, we have 5 choices: homicide, accident, suicide, natural, or undetermined.
In your observation of these wounds, you mentioned you can't tell the order in which they occurred. Is that right?
That's correct, yes.
You can't tell maybe the height or size of the person who may have fired the gun. Is that fair to say?
That's correct.
And you can't tell which individual was injured first, can you?
That's also correct, yes.
Can you mentioned you can't tell the caliber specifically, whether it was a 40 caliber or 226 or 9, anything of that nature. Can you tell by the wounds if the wounds were caused by the same firearm?
I cannot tell if the wounds were caused by the same firearm. There is no scientific way to do that.
You mentioned that Mr. Clark had some abrasions on his face.
He had an abrasion or scrape, I believe, below his right lip. Let me refer to my report to make sure I'm saying that correctly. Yes, below the right lip, he had a scrape or abrasion.
And that abrasion would show that that injury occurred prior to passing away. Is that right?
That's correct, yes.
And could an abrasion like that have come from an altercation, like a fight?
That's one possibility. All that I can say is that injury was caused by a blunt object, so an object without a sharp cutting edge striking the skin surface, or the skin surface striking an object without a sharp cutting edge.
In addition to checking for manner and cause of death, you also said you performed a sexual assault kit. Is that right?
And that's correct, yes.
And that was upon request of law enforcement?
Yes.
And that sexual assault kit, you said that you took samples or information from, or data from face and extremities like hands and feet, or where did you get this information from for the sexual assault kit?
Let me see what I exactly took it from in these cases. Did not take from hands in these cases. For Ms. Woods, took swabs from the oral cavity, the rectal cavity, and the vagina and the external genitalia. For Mr. Clark, I took swabs from the oral cavity, the anal cavity, and the external genitalia.
In your time as a medical examiner, have you ever been asked to get gunshot residue, do a gunshot residue test?
We generally do not do that at the time of autopsy. That is a test that's better done sooner rather than later for higher yield information. So we will usually request that law enforcement does that at the scene rather than holding it until we get the body.
Okay. And then you said you took a blood card for each individual.
And that's correct, yes.
And then once that blood card is taken, I think you said blood is put on an absorbent cloth.
An absorbent card, yes.
Card. And then that is packaged so that it can go to the lab, or does it go back to law enforcement?
I hand it to law enforcement, and usually it eventually makes its way to the lab via law enforcement.
One moment, Judge.
Yes, sir.
Dr. Scott, I had missed, there was another abrasion for Mr. Clark. I think it was on his side or rib.
His left abdomen, yes.
Left abdomen. And that was an injury that would have been caused while he was still alive. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
And that could have come from some type of hit or blunt force trauma?
Yes, again, it's a blunt force injury. I cannot say any more than it was caused by an object without a sharp cutting edge hitting the skin surface, or the skin surface falling on and hitting such an object without a sharp cutting edge.
Okay. Thank you, Judge. No further questions.
Any redirect?
No, Your Honor, thank you.
All right. Doctor, thank you so much for being with us. Any objection to releasing the doctor from her subpoena obligations?
No, Your Honor.
No objection from the defense.
All right, doctor, thank you so much. All right, we're at our noon, oh no, we're not. Can't tell time. All right, state's next witness, my apologies.
Your Honor, my next witness is walking over from the sheriff's office as we speak.
And who will that be?
That will be investigator Walter Vila.
Mr. Beeler, when you take a seat, just make sure you're close to the mic, okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Would you please state and spell your name for the court reporter?
Walter Vila, Walter, V as in Victor, ILA.
And where are you employed?
Orange County Sheriff's Office.
In what capacity are you currently working there?
I am an investigator.
And how long have you been an investigator?
Probably since about, here at the Sheriff's Office, since probably 2021, maybe,
And when did you start at the sheriff's office?
2018.
Were you in law enforcement prior to that?
Yes, ma'am.
Where was that?
I was at the UNC Hospitals Police Department.
And what were your duties there?
I was also an investigator there.
What are your total years of experience in law enforcement?
Since 2012, I was sworn in.
And were you working at the sheriff's office as an investigator back in September of 2022?
I was.
And do you recall responding to an area on Buckhorn Road in reference to a death investigation?
Yes.
And
I
can
did.
you describe what happened when you arrived there?
Yeah, so I arrived. It's a power easement just east of Buckhorn Road, right there on Yarborough. I arrived. There was a couple investigators and some deputies on scene already. It kind of gave me just a quick brief on what was going on, and then I just was assigned to just help or assist Investigator Baldwin process evidence, help him do anything I could just to get the scene tidied up the way he wanted to.
And what kinds of things did you help him do?
So he did all his photographs and stuff. I helped him put markers and flags on items that he deemed necessary. He also designated some points that we would take measurements off of, so we could triangulate those pieces of evidence, just so the scene could be reconstructed if it ever needed to.
And did you assist with locating items of evidence?
Yes, ma'am. Like so I guess I should have mentioned, when we get there, before we start marking things, we try to find the things first. So yeah, I assisted with that as well.
And how do you do that?
Just walked around the general area of the scene, just trying to get an idea for where things might be, where things could be. Really just walk around very carefully and try to do the best we can to try to locate items.
And when you were there, were the bodies of the two folks still there?
Yes, ma'am, they were.
And did you have an opportunity to observe them?
I did.
And what did you observe about them?
So I observed the two bodies. It was a young African-American kid, and then the young Caucasian female that were both, say, like perfectly positioned, but they were laying on their backs with their arms spread out, almost like their bodies made a T, and they were like just right next to each other in the same manner. Faces up to the sky.
On the 18th, when you were helping Investigator Baldwin, did you actually collect any items of evidence?
I did not. I let him package and process everything.
And then I want to draw your attention to the following day, Monday, September 19th. What, if any, steps did you take regarding this investigation on that day?
So the following day, I went through the area of Buckhorn, just looking for any place that might have cameras, anything that would help forward the investigation. I was pretty unsuccessful getting anybody to the door or having anybody that had a camera that would be visible towards the road. I did make contact with a person just south of the crime scene. They stated they really hadn't seen anything, but they were out that night, and it's a rural area, so he said sometimes shooting is kind of like here and there, so nothing notable. However, I also went to the intersection of West 10 and Buckhorn Road. There is a car dealership there, and I know that they have surveillance system just working prior cases that looks at that intersection. So we took one of our IT technicians and we went there and just grabbed a chunk of time from the DVR just so that we could bring it to the office and evaluate it.
Okay. Did you also respond to an address in Mebane on Holt Street?
I did.
Whose residence was that?
So it was, if I'm not mistaken, it was 705 West Holt Street. To my understanding, it was the residence where Clark was reported missing, across the street from the residence where he had been reported missing. So I just wanted to see if maybe there was some surveillance camera on that residence across the street or nearby that could help us, maybe with a vehicle or something like that. There was a Ring camera on that house. However, the owners had purposely set the perimeter so that it didn't pick up any vehicular traffic on the road because it would just be constantly going off. So unfortunately, wasn't able to get anything from there.
And on the 19th, did you also return to the area where the bodies were found?
I did.
And why were you returning there?
So I returned with now Lieutenant Hendricks to the scene. I think there was some item that might have been located by family. So we returned just to make sure, follow up. And I remember I was standing on that, on the gravel there, and I guess the sunlight just must have hit the object perfectly. I caught a glint of something metal. I looked down, and it was what I recognized to be a spent shell casing.
And how were you able to recognize that as a spent shell casing?
I have a lot of experience with firearms. We obviously had collected some the day before, so it looked to me like a shell casing. I looked at it a little bit closer. It looked like what I recognize as a 9mm shell casing. And so I went back to my vehicle, put on some gloves, got a evidence bag, and put the item into evidence, sealed it up, and gave it directly to Investigator Baldwin once I got back to the office.
What kind of envelope did you place it in?
I don't know. I don't recall exactly what kind of envelope it was. It was an evidence. So at the time, I was specifically assigned to narcotics investigations. So I can't remember, but my best of my recollection is that it was a clear bag, something that we use very regularly. When we come across narcotics, we'll put it in those bags. We'll write date, time. We'll bring it back to the office. We'll process it. We'll test it. We'll weigh it, and then we'll put it in the appropriate evidence bag at that point, so we don't waste evidence bags. And I think that's all I had available on me at the time. So I kind of did the same thing, dated it, put a time, and then sealed it up and brought it straight to Investigator Baldwin. That's the best of my recollection.
And based on your knowledge of Investigator Baldwin's processes, do you think he would have repackaged that in a different way?
Yes, absolutely.
And I know you said you have lots of experience with firearms. You don't have to go into a lot of detail, but would you just give the jury a little bit of your background?
Yes, ma'am. So I am a firearms instructor for the agency. I'm also a team leader on the SWAT team. I used to do recreational shooting before I was in law enforcement. Obviously, in law enforcement, I have to carry a firearm, so I have a lot of experience.
Thank you. May I approach the witness?
You may.
Investigator Vila, I will show you what's previously been marked for identification as State's Exhibit 75 and ask you if you recognize this item.
Yes.
And what is State's Exhibit 75?
Showcasing.
And looking at the exterior of State's Exhibit 75, it says collected by W. Vila.
Yes, ma'am.
But is this the packaging that you put that showcasing in?
I believe that was it's repackaged from Investigator Baldwin.
And for the record, I'm removing the contents of State's Exhibit 75. I am wearing a glove. And Investigator Vila, do you recognize the item contained in State's Exhibit 75?
Yes, ma'am.
And what is contained in State's Exhibit 75?
It's a spent shell casing.
And does this appear to be the same or similar to the shell casing you collected on September 19th?
Yes, ma'am.
The same.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
The same.
All right, this time I would move State's Exhibit 75 into evidence.
Any objection?
Your Honor, can we be heard outside the presence of the jury?
Yes. Ladies and gentlemen, we just need a couple moments, so I'm going to have you walk back down to the jury room. If y'all would please leave your notebooks on your chairs, and everybody else, please remain seated. All right, all of our jurors have left the courtroom. Mr. Trapp.
Your Honor, I was listening to Investigator Vila's testimony, and I wasn't quite sure who actually found this item, and I was going to ask if I could voir dire, because I feel like there might be a little disconnect as to, was it Sergeant Hendricks, was it Investigator Vila? Did someone call them and say they found something? And I guess before we kind of went down this road, I figured I'd ask. I didn't want to object to it being introduced because that has been introduced, but there were just some things that I learned just now that I didn't have here in the
I'm not
report.
sure it actually has been admitted into evidence.
It was not admitted, Your Honor.
Okay.
Okay.
But yes, you may voir dire the witness.
Thank you. Investigator Vila,
Yes, sir.
you mentioned that you were on scene the day before on September 18th.
Yes, sir.
And you helped Investigator Baldwin and maybe some other officers kind of walk the scene and look for evidence.
Yes, sir.
You said that you yourself didn't collect it, but you helped kind of locate and him mark it so that he could collect it, right?
Yeah, I mean, I put some placards down as well, just based on whatever he deemed appropriate.
Okay. And then at some point, the scene was cleared.
Yes, sir.
You mentioned that on the following day, you went back to that area to find cameras and footage to see if maybe there was something visible you could see that might identify a person or a car or something like that, right?
Yes, sir.
And you even mentioned some locations that you went to, a car dealership, a house, so on and so forth.
Your Honor, objection at this time. This is not on the subject on which Mr. Trapp asked to take Investigator Vila en voir dire.
I'm kind of getting back to where we were. So
Mr. Trapp, I feel like we're going to hear these questions again in a little bit, but can we focus first on him going back and
Well-
finding the evidence?
okay. Why did you respond back to the area on Buckhorn and Yarborough?
So Investigator Hendricks had advised me that he'd gotten information. There might be a personal item that was located by family there at the scene. So I was just going to accompany him. Just as a good rule of thumb, we always do things in pairs if we can. I'll just have a witness. We went back to follow up on that, and I was just standing around on the gravel there, and I happened to catch this item, and I had to collect it. I mean, I thought it pertinent to the case, so I collected it.
So to be clear, you didn't receive any information. Sergeant Hendricks received information that there might be additional evidence at the scene.
Yeah, my recollection is that I did not receive a direct phone call. I was asked to accompany him. Yes, sir.
And when you arrived, or prior to your arrival, were you told what you should be looking for?
Yeah, I think it was like a telephone cord or something like that.
And did you recover that telephone cord?
I did not.
But in looking for the telephone cord, you then found a shell casing.
Yes.
And that shell casing was found where?
It was found right there on the scene. the exact location. It was just, I don't know if I noted it. It was just right there on the gravel. Exactly, I don't know. I couldn't tell you and be accurate.
Roundabout, was it near the,
So I do, actually, I do recollect, I think I did note it on my report. So the day before, it should be noted on Investigator Baldwin's ledger of evidence items, wherever the red slides, I believe, that were located, that shell casing was near where the red slides were located.
okay. So this was an area that you had maybe walked over before, but you're saying you just didn't notice it the day before?
Yes, sir.
And when you arrived on scene, did you get there first or Sergeant Hendricks get there first?
To the best of my recollection, I believe we got there about the same time. I think we came from the office together, is the best I can remember.
And there were no other officers there?
No other officers there that I remember.
Thank you, Judge. That's no further questions.
Ms. Orr, do you have any questions you want to ask?
Investigator Vila, are you the person who spotted this shell casing?
Yes, ma'am.
And are you the person who collected it?
Yes, ma'am.
That's all, Your Honor. Thank you.
I'll hear from you, Mr. Trapp.
Your Honor, I believe my questions were answered. There were just some information that was provided today that I didn't have before, so I just wanted to get clarification on kind of how this came about. I didn't understand why the report says he responded. I just didn't know what he responded to.
And Mr. Trapp, I apologize. So at this point, the state's moved to admit that evidence. Are you going to be making an objection to that admissibility of State 75?
No, I'm not.
Okay, all right, that's perfect then. All right, let's go ahead. Unless there's anything else, State?
No, Your Honor. Thank you.
Vince?
No, Your Honor.
All right, let's bring our jury back, please. All right, thank you, everyone. At this time, the state's moved to admit State's Exhibit number 75. Any objections?
No objection, Your Honor.
All right, State 75 will be admitted into evidence.
Thank you, Your Honor. Investigator Vila, where was State 75, the shell casing, located?
It was located there on the scene, and I believe I had made in my report a note that I had located it near the location where red slides were found.
And those red slides were found when?
The day before.
And what was it that you and Sergeant, at the time, Sergeant Hendricks, were out there looking for? Do you recall?
Yeah, I believe it was a telephone cord that maybe some family had located somewhere about the scene there, and we were tasked to go follow up on that.
Did you locate that item on the scene?
I did not.
And did you collect anything else from the scene other than State's Exhibit 75?
No, ma'am.
Did you locate anything else on the scene? Any other shell casings, anything?
No, ma'am.
And do you have any knowledge of whether this phone cord that you were looking for was ever located?
Not direct knowledge. No, ma'am. Direct, yes, ma'am.
Those are all the questions I have for Investigator Vila. Thank you.
Mr. Trapp, Cross?
Yes, please. Investigator Vila, on the 18th, do you recall how many officers you were walking along with looking for and identifying evidence with Investigator Baldwin?
Obviously, myself, Investigator Baldwin, now Captain Jeffrey was on scene, and Major Wood, I believe, was on scene.
And do you you have an idea of how long you guys were kind of identifying and walking the scene and looking for items?
I mean, it's a tedious process. We were there for I remember the sun coming down, for sure. It was dark when we left.
But when you arrived, the sun was up.
Yes, sir.
Would you estimate it was at least an hour, maybe two?
Oh, no. When I got there, it was, I believe it was 3:30 when I got there. It's in my report.
And so you're saying it might be more than an hour or two.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yes, sir.
And there are a number of items that were identified or found on that first day, September 18th.
Yes, sir.
And you even mentioned, I believe when you were with Investigator Baldwin, not only did you help him walk the scene and find items, you helped put the placards down, the numbers down for each of these items so that they could be identified. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
And after you helped him do that, were there other things that you helped him with that day on the 18th?
No, I mean, probably helped him take equipment back to the vehicle, just maybe get stuff back into his car.
And then the following day, you were doing additional work when it comes to this case, right?
Yes, sir.
You were trying to find visual information, camera footage, and the like?
Yes, sir.
And you did find camera footage, is that right?
Yes, sir.
But while you're in this process of going to different homes and businesses, you got a call.
Yes, sir.
And that call was from who?
Well, so actually, I don't want to say anything inaccurate. I don't know if I got a call. It might have been that I had finished my canvassing and been back at the office and then told to accompany Sergeant Hendricks at the time. I don't know specifically that it was a phone call that I got or somebody told me person to person, go accompany Sergeant Hendricks to the but at that point, I was tasked with going back.
And so it was communicated to you to go back to this scene, this easement, and when you arrived, was Sergeant Hendricks already there?
If he was not there, we arrived together. If not, we arrived within a very short distance of each other.
And you two were told that you were to look for a cell phone cord, is that correct?
That's to the best of my knowledge, yes, sir.
Do you recall what color it was, or was there any description of what you're looking for?
No, not that I recall.
And when you were searching for this telephone cord, it was daytime, correct?
Yes.
You said that the sun just kind of shined and you saw a shell casing that you did not see with your other partners.
Yes, sir.
And how long were you out looking for this phone cord on the 19th?
I wouldn't say it was very long at all. I mean, I happened to be there, and it just so happened. I wouldn't say I spent a lot of time there. It was a short period of time we spent there.
Now, you mentioned that you collected it and that you put it in a bag. Did you take a picture of it?
I don't believe I took a picture of it, no, sir.
But you recall that where it was located was where the red slide was found. Is that right?
Yes, I do recall from being there the day before that was the location where the red slides were found, or red slide was found.
Was this found in the gravel area or the grass area?
You would have to refer to Investigator Baldwin's notes. He's got everything measured out. I don't want to say anything inaccurate. I don't want to.
But the shell casing, did you pull it out of the grass or did you pull it out of the gravel?
It could have been a mix of both. So you have to understand this scene is very rural. There's a lot of gravel. There's a lot of thick brush. So somewhere in between, it was just the best I could describe it was near where the red slide was found.
Your Honor, can I approach the clerk?
Yes, sir.
I'm looking for states exhibits 15 and 16 that have already been admitted. There should be photos. May I approach?
Yes, sir.
May I approach the witness?
You may.
Investigator Vila, these have already been previously admitted as states exhibits 15 and 16. Do you recognize the item in these two pictures?
Yes, sir.
And what is it that you see?
Those are red slides.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
And if you were to take a look at this red slide in either 15 or 16, can you determine where you found this shell casing?
No, sir.
Okay.
I mean, I'm not going to be able to. That's very thick brush right there. I can't.
Investigator Villa, remember to keep your voice up. You're talking to the.
I'm sorry, ma'am. It's a thick brush there. I can't to say something honestly. I can't tell you exactly where, in relation to that red slide, it was found. The slide was not there the next day.
Right, but in looking at Exhibit 15, which is a close-up
Yes,
of
sir.
the slide, you mentioned that it was found in this general area.
Yes, sir.
If you were to describe this picture, just the close-up, does it look like it's mostly grass or gravel?
It looks like it's grass growing on top of gravel. Yes, sir.
All right, but do you see any gravel in State's Exhibit 15?
No, sir. I see no.
Now, when you zoom out, and you can still see that same red slide or flip-flop, you do see some gravel, right?
Yes, sir.
But mostly grass.
Sure. Yes.
Okay. And so your testimony is that you were in this vicinity where you see this grass and this gravel, and that the sun was shining on this shell casing and that it reflected back and you saw it.
Yes, sir.
I'm going to return this back to the clerk. When you were at the scene with Investigator Hendricks, was there anybody there to assist you when you were searching? Any other officers or any other?
No, sir. Not that I recall.
And when you found this shell casing, did you immediately contact anyone else in law enforcement to let them know what you found?
Sergeant Hendricks, who would have been there with me, I let him know that I had located it, and I went back to my car, got my gloves, and collected it.
Did you contact Investigator Baldwin or Investigator Goodwin or anyone else involved in the case?
Once at the office. Yes, sir.
And is it protocol for you to collect evidence and bag it before you take a picture of it?
No, I usually photograph things before I collect them.
And when you are out on this day, are you normally fashioned with a body cam?
No.
So you rarely wear one if at all?
Yeah, so I do wear a body cam. I wear a lot of plain clothes as well, so.
So on this day, you're saying you're plain clothes?
Yes, sir.
And to your recollection, did this shell casing, was it similar to one of the ones you found on the 18th?
Yes, sir.
Same make, same color?
Well, that's, unless I read the stamps on the back, but a 9mm spent shell casing, yes, it looked like just like the ones we had gathered the day before.
No further questions, Judge.
Redirect.
Nothing further for Investigator Vila. Thank you.
All right, Investigator Bill, you are excused this time. Thank you.
Your Honor.
The state will call Captain Jeff Ray.
Left hand on the Bible and raise your right. You solemnly swear that the testimony you give is full and true to be the truth, whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
Captain Ray, just take your seat and make sure you're close to that microphone, okay?
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Would you please state and spell your name for the court reporter?
Jeff Ray, last name R-A-Y,
And where are you employed?
Orange County Sheriff's Office.
How long have you been there?
May will be 20 years.
And what are your current duties with the Sheriff's Office?
The captain of the Investigation Division.
How long have you been the captain?
Maybe 2021.
And what were your positions within the Sheriff's Office prior to that?
Started in the detention center, then moved to courts and transportation, the patrol division, criminal investigations.
Will you slide that microphone just a little bit closer to you? Thank you. And what capacity were you working in the investigations division back in September of 2022?
The captain of investigations.
And did you respond on September 18th to the scene at Buckhorn Road near Yarborough Road?
I did.
And what did you do when you got there?
Once I got there, I just helped measure the scene, helped do measurements with the investigator Baldwin.
And did you have any other role other than assisting investigator Baldwin while you were there?
Not at the scene, no.
I want to draw your attention to the following day, September 19th. Did you speak with an individual by the name of James Rogers?
I did.
And what did you talk to Mr. Rogers about?
Mr. Rogers lives in the area on Buckhorn Road near Yarborough, and about some gunshots that he heard on Saturday morning.
Did he give you any specifics about that?
He did. He had heard two groups of shots, one approximately 2:10, give or take, and then he said that was about 5 to 7 shots coming from a field across from his house. He looked out the window at the time and did not see anything, and then he heard a couple more shots, and he was pretty sure that it was Saturday morning because he was leaving that morning to go to the coast.
Did he have any other information that you got from him at that time?
He did not.
Also on September 19th, did you speak to an individual by the name of Christian Sykes?
I did.
And what, if any, information did you gather from Mr. Sykes?
I spoke with Christian on the phone. I was in my office, and he said that a friend had confessed to him about a shooting that happened the day before or 2 days before.
And did you get that friend's name from him?
I did.
What was that?
He said he went by Issiah.
Did he know a last name?
He did not at the time.
Had you all received any other phone calls with people wanting to provide information about this case?
We did.
How many over the weekend?
I don't know the exact, it was numerous.
What was it about speaking to Mr. Sykes specifically that sort of led you to follow up on your conversation with him?
Well, I spoke with him. I got some notes that I wrote down while he was speaking with me. He said that Isaiah told him.
Not for the truth of the matter to explain what steps the investigators took. Investigator Ray, without going into any details about what Mr. Sykes told you, were the things he told you consistent with other information that had come up in your investigation?
They were.
And did he provide you a phone number for this individual named Isaiah?
He did.
And what was that phone number?
Area code 908-440-5523.
And did he know where this individual lived?
He said he lived in Mebane.
Did he provide you any more specific information about where he lived?
He said he did attend Eastern High School, and he said he knew his mother lived in.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we'll break just a little bit early so we can discuss all this with the lawyers. So I'm releasing you to lunch. So remember the rules. Number one, you can all have lunch together. You can talk about anything you want, including how wonderfully chilly it is today. But you cannot talk about this case. Number two, remember you cannot talk to anybody else. That includes your family, your friends, your loved ones about what's going on. Remember, all you can tell them is you're still sitting as a juror in this particular trial. Do not allow anybody to talk to you or around you about the case is currently pending. Remember to let me know if anybody does anything like that. Third, I know you guys have held off, so I need you to keep holding off. No encyclopedias over lunch, all right? None of you other folks help them find any, all right? Along with that, remember, no independent research of any kind. Don't Google, don't AI, don't check anything about this case, about the folks involved in the law, anything like that. Lastly, please remember to keep your minds open. You have not heard all the evidence in this case. You have not heard the arguments of counsel, and you have not heard the law that you're going to need to apply in this case. So with that, if everybody else will please remain seated, I'll ask our jurors to leave their notepads in their chairs, and we'll excuse them for lunch. We'll be back at 2. All right, all of our jurors are outside of the courtroom. Ms. Orr, why don't you go ahead and ask your witness the question? Let's hear what the answer is, and then we can talk about it.
Absolutely, Your Honor. Captain Ray, did Mr. Sykes give you an address for for Isaiah that he knew?
He said he knew that his mother lived in Deerfield Apartments.
Were there any other questions that were going to elicit similar testimony?
No, Your Honor, that was all.
All right. All right, so Mr. Trapp, let me hear from you.
Yes, Judge. Prior to us taking a break, we had a bench conference. I had objected. We spoke briefly. I felt that at least at the time the questions were being asked, Captain Ray was giving statements that he got from Mr. Sykes outside of court, and so I was bringing up the idea of hearsay. And so you mentioned to Ms. Orr, you could ask Captain Ray, did you receive information from this individual without getting details about what was said? And I felt that at first that's where we were, but then we started soliciting more detailed information. First, the specific phone number, all 10 digits, and then it seemed like we were giving like an address of where Mr. Ross lived, and I thought that we were kind of going outside of what we had agreed upon at the bench conference of details.
So I believe that Ms. Orr said she's offering this testimony not for the truth of the matter, but to show why officers took their next steps. I'll be more than happy to give an instruction to the jury that they're not to consider any information from Mr. Sykes for the truth of the matter of what he said, but can only consider it to show the effect that that information had on the officer's subsequent actions. So I'm assuming what we're going to get next is that in the follow-up to this, they're going to go to try to track down your client, including going to this address and using the phone number?
That's correct, Your Honor.
Does that sound about right?
That's right.
All right. So I think that information then is going to directly impact how testimony about what officers did next. So I think it falls under that exception to hearsay. But I will be happy to make sure I give that instruction, if you'd like me to the jury of how they can consider that evidence.
Yes, please.
All right. Don't let me forget, Mr. Trapp, when we come back, I will make sure to give that instruction to the jury. Ms. Orr, as far as you're concerned, that's the only information you're going to be soliciting about the conversation between this witness and Mr. Sykes. Is that correct?
That is correct, Your Honor.
Okay. That seems to be it. So I will overrule your objection to the extent that it is being offered not for the truth, but simply to show the effect of that information on subsequent actions by the officer.
Yes, Judge.
All right. Anything else? I know we probably could have done that in 5 minutes, sorry, but getting everybody up and down takes a little bit of time. Is there anything else that we should address before we break, Ms. Orr?
Yes, Your Honor, I do have one additional thing. I have a request to add a witness to my witness list. That witness is Stan Dean. He is Lyric Woods' grandfather. And the reason I would like to add him is that I am assuming from the sort of lines of questioning that Mr. Trapp has been after regarding this shell casing that was collected on the Monday after the scene was cleared on Sunday. I'm happy to give the court just a brief proffer of what I expect his testimony would be. He and some other members of the Eflin Fire Department, after the sheriff's office cleared the scene on Sunday night, had taken down the crime scene tape. He called and received permission for them to go clean up the scene and wash away the blood because Lyric's mother, Elizabeth, wanted to visit that location, and they wanted to remove that before she went there. I intend to suggest to the jury that perhaps this shell casing was dislodged from where it may have been hidden from investigators upon their initial observation of the scene on the 18th, but after things were disturbed with their cleaning of the scene, that it became visible, and that's why it was located by Investigator Vila on Monday rather than on the Sunday.
Mr. Trapp?
Your Honor, I was notified about this for the first time today. This was not in discovery. In addition to the fact that this is new information that was provided to me, We both agreed on a sequestration order. I'm not certain who this individual is or what they look like, but my understanding is that they're probably in the audience and have had an opportunity to listen to testimony. And so those would be my two initial reasons. And then also, it seems like the state's reason for putting this witness up, there isn't anything to confirm this theory that the bullet was, or shell casing, I'm sorry, I used the right term, was dislodged or put in view because of whatever techniques they used. At this point, Investigator Vila has said that he's gone back to the scene after being told to look for something else, and that when he went back to the scene, he found the shell casing in or near where this red flip-flop might have been located in that vicinity. I don't know, if this testimony will make it any clearer as to why he found it. It's already been admitted. And more importantly, we don't really have an opportunity to verify any of these other factors. The crime scene was closed, or what could have happened after they cleaned up and when Sergeant Vila came in. So we would object to the testimony.
Ms. Orr, this wasn't part of the discovery.
This particular information was not a part of the discovery. I learned it from speaking with family members because I did not anticipate whatever we're going down with regard to this particular shell casing, especially given the ballistics report. I did not see it as a fact that would be exculpatory to the defendant or even potentially exculpatory, and so I did not believe it needed to be memorialized or turned over. I only connected the possible relevance when we started spending so much time talking about State's Exhibit 75.
Has Mr. Dean been in the courtroom?
He has.
Okay. Just as a potential preview, since I do not know, State 75, is that part of the ballistics evidence the state is going to be presenting?
Yes.
Am I correct in my thought that State 75 is going to be a projectile that forensic ballistics is going to match with the other bullets that have been recovered? They've all came from the same gun?
All shell casings, but yes.
All shell casings, excuse me. I apologize. Is that sound about right, Mr. Trapp?
Yes, Jim, that sounds about right.
This is what I'm going to do. I am not going to make a ruling on this. What I am going to require is, number one, Ms. Orr, if you are going to tender any of this testimony, I need a summary of what you're going to suggest that Mr. Dean is going to testify to. That needs to be turned over to the defense. That needs to include, if Mr. Dean knows, anybody else who was there at the time that this cleanup was done on the crime scene.
Yes, Your Honor.
All right. That needs to also include any contact information from those folks who were there at the time. That first needs to be turned over to the defense. I'm going to give the defense an opportunity to review that. If at some point there, and I'm not saying you can't, Mr. Trapp, I don't need to know what your defense strategy has been. You've done a marvelous job so far. You're clearly on top of all this evidence. You're doing a great job. I don't know what the end of this road looks like, and I don't know what's going to come up. I will revisit this issue in the state's request after we get to that evidence or beyond that evidence if there are issues raised that would make Mr. Dean's testimony more relevant.
Yes, Your Honor, and I think that what you just said is my concern, is that, this case has been going on for a long time, as everyone in this courtroom knows, and I haven't had a chance to review it. I don't know really where this is going to end up. So I look forward to reviewing it, and then we can readdress it with the court afterwards.
Yes. I would ask at this point, since Mr. Dean is a potential witness, that you ask Mr. Dean to step out, just like any potential witness who's being sequestered. I need you to also look at who potentially else could be called, if you're thinking of calling them, or who the defense may, after reviewing this, I will Mr. Trapp, I will consider any requests you have about anybody else who potentially needs to be excluded from being in the courtroom while testimony's going on. Well, if we get to that point where Mr. Dean's testimony becomes more relevant because of questions that are raised about State 75 in relation to its ballistics or anything else, I'll revisit that. We'll deal with Mr. Trapp. Any concerns the defense has is about ability to properly address that evidence in terms of your ability to cross-examine and any other information you feel like you might need. And we can talk about whether more time would be necessary for you to be able to deal with that witness and any other objections you may have to that testimony. Does that make sense?
Yes, Your Honor, thank you.
All right. Yes, ma'am.
Your Honor, because Mr. Dean was not on my witness list, when we addressed the sequestration order, I did not specifically request that he be exempted from it. He and his wife have been here the whole time. I would have made that request had he been on my witness list at the time, but he wasn't. And so I would make that request now.
Grounds?
That he is a close family member of the decedent.
And I respect those grounds, but that if he's going to be a factual witness, then I can't have him here in the courtroom under the defense's agreement to sequester facts witnesses.
Absolutely, Your Honor.
I understand what you're asking, and it's all in good faith. But if we're going to use Mr. Dean as a potential fact witness, then he needs to, like all the rest of our fact witnesses, be outside the courtroom while other witnesses are testifying.
Understood, Your Honor.
And I realize this is just a possibility at this point, but let's start with keeping Mr. Dean out until after you've turned over your information. Let Mr. Trapp and his team review that information, and then maybe we can talk about it. I don't think it's fair to ask Mr. Trapp at this point to be able to say whether he finds what you're proposing to be good or bad for him or for his client, because he doesn't really have the ability right now to assess what that really is. So let's give him an opportunity to review that, and then we can readdress whether Mr. Dean's testimony could be useful or not.
Absolutely, Your Honor.
All right.
And just one additional question. Would the court be satisfied if I asked Mr. Dean to prepare a written summary of what he recalls from that night, including the contact information of those individuals, or would the court prefer that I prepare it with his assistance?
I don't actually have a preference either way. Ms. Orr, you an outstanding officer of the court. You do your job. You understand your responsibilities. I'm not concerned that you will not do them well. I don't think Mr. Trapp is either. So.
It doesn't matter. The person who puts it down, whether she gets it or it's said to her legal assistant, we just want to know what information is going to be used.
Yeah, I think that's fine. And I don't think Mr. Dean, what we're going to be asking for is going to be a huge amount of information.
Right.
I think the most important thing, though, is that we get it done efficiently.
Yes, Your Honor.
Again, Mr. Trapp has to have the time to be able to review that information, to go over it with his team, to be able to talk to his client about it, to be able to allow him to have cogent arguments about whether he thinks that's a plus or a minus in his trial strategy.
Right.
Again, that is totally in Mr. Trapp's control, and he has to have the ability. This might be something that he decides he does want. It might be something after reviewing it he wants to continue his objection to. So whether you summarize it, one of your assistants, whether you have Mr. Dean type it up, my only concern is to get it done sooner rather than later.
Absolutely.
All right. All right.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Mr. Trapp, is there anything else that I can do regarding this issue for you, or anything else you want to raise?
No, not at this time, Judge. And like I said, we discussed it before court this morning, and once I get the information, I will follow up with Ms. Orr and with the court as to any further objections or issues we may have.
That's fantastic. All right. Anything else, Mr. Trapp?
Nothing from the defense.
Anything else, Ms. Orr?
No, Your Honor. Thank you.
All right. Thank you all very much. All right. We will be in recess until 2 p.m.